I mean, one of the things that I saw between the RNC and the DNC, the RNC, they were constantly saying, we built it ourselves, right? So you can trust us and you can do it yourself. And the DNC, the message was constantly, we will be there with you. I mean, Obama at the end, he's appropriating marine language. We leave no one behind. Michelle Obama, we don't slam the door behind us. Clinton constantly talking about cooperation. Even Julian Castro talking about, life is a relay, not a marathon. So we will be there with you. And I think if you are financially struggling, what do you want to hear? That we are going to help you, or we're going to leave you alone because what you need is personal responsibility. Your house is underwater because you don't have enough character.
Well, if you're if you're a partisan up in the hills of Tennessee, sort of like running around, armed to the teeth, like you're a member of Hezbollah, then you probably want to hear the Republican message.
Hezbollah reference in under 2 minutes.
There's very little difference between the Bekaa Valley and like the mountains of eastern Tennessee. It's religious fanatics armed to the teeth. It's just the reality.
I've actually been to Hezbollah territory. It's a gigantic difference. I felt more comfortable there than in Tennessee, but whatever.
I can confirm that.
But certain people want to hear different messages, and it's which of those is going to ring true with more people. Some people don't want to hear that they're being taken care of.
The Republican message.
Wait. No. I think some people don't want to hear other people will be taken care of, right? They don't want to. Nobody wants to hear you won't be taken care of.
That's exactly it. The Republican message, the dog whistle, is government. Government is a euphemism for the black women you see at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And what happens is that, for these Republicans and for the white people at the heart of this party right now, it's a very scary country. We were talking about this before, and I was at a thing in Arkansas a few years ago where a Democratic Senator, Blanche Lincoln, was dealing with 1,000 white people and who were screaming Glenn Beck talking points about Van Jones being a communist and things like that at her. And I realized that these were people who looked at this country and they saw the good jobs that they used to have gone. But all of a sudden, there are all these other kinds of people. They had, we used to just have blacks and we could be bigoted against them. Now we have, where did these Indians come from who are running all the mini-marts? Why won't the Mexicans learn English? Why has my grandson just decided he's gay? Why is my granddaughter dating a Malaysian? I mean, and why can't the President of the United States be one or the other instead of both? I mean, they're terrified.
I'm going to ask you a question. But there was a Washington Post poll recently that talked about how Democrats tend to change their values as the world changes, and Republicans want the world to fit their values, right? That is generally how we go, and Republicans tend to feel that things are being tolerated that used to be immoral that should still be immoral. But to Joe's central point, right? The Republican Party is 90% white. Every election since 1992, there's a smaller number of white people voting. We know that the number of Hispanic people is rising and that in the nearest future, white people will become the minority, right? And speaking to what Lindsey Graham spoke about, that we are not creating enough angry white people to stay in business for the long term. That's an actual quote. Has everybody heard this quote? I'm surprised this isn't making more national news. We are not generating enough angry white guys to stay in business for the long term. Lindsey Graham said that to the Washington Post. Is that true? Does the Republican Party have to change fundamentally from being a 90% white party?
Okay. So you're talking to somebody who's written a lot about the millennial generation and about the need. We all know that demographics are destiny. The millennial generation is 40% non-white. We know that the Republican Party is going to have to do some things to modernize if it's going to start making new Republicans. And also you're talking to somebody who's very active in the LGBT rights group, and I do a lot of work on the Republican side for freedom to marry. So I actually, I think you're right in a lot of ways. But I think we're a little in the clouds as we talk about the issues that are going to matter in this election, because the folks that we're talking about, especially in those battleground states, those 4% undecideds in those 300 counties, care about jobs, and they care about the economy, and they need employment. And that, at the end of the day, I think it's less this year going to be about who you want to have a beer with, and more going to be about who can turn it around. and they like President Obama, but if Mitt Romney passes the threshold of the debates, the question is going to be, should we give him a chance, or should we risk sticking with the same program for the next 4 years?
That's true, but for one thing, and it's this. I spent a lot of time, I spent the month of June going through battleground states and doing town meetings with, with folks. And, my parents' generation saw government as a force for real good. Government got them through the Depression. Government helped them win World War II, and then provided a GI Bill afterwards and so on. People my age, and certainly people your age, don't get to see government do things very, like that makes a difference in their lives. But in Ohio and Michigan and throughout the Midwest, they have seen something like that in the last 3 years. The auto bailout. The bottom did not drop out of Ohio because of the auto bailout. 1 million jobs were saved. And people there really know this. And they're incredibly proud of it. And so, they look at these two candidates. One of them is a guy who saved their economy, and the other is a guy who does private equity deals and pays taxes at the rate of 13%.
Or less. And would have let Detroit die, which is a very painful thing to have to wear around his neck at this point.
To be fair, I think Mitt Romney would say he was in favor of managed bankruptcy rather than dying, right?
That's,
so he wanted
that's such nonsense because you
we'll have that debate.
But
that is a debate American people will be able to weigh in on.
It's not even a debate. The reality was that you couldn't do a managed bailout. With the auto companies in the state that they were, you had to have the government guarantee it, so then you could move to a managed bailout.
If that's the discussion that it comes down to, there's no way Romney can win that.
I agree with you. He's going to have a hard time. I mean, you're in the weeds. It's a hard sell. I agree with you. It's a hard sell. But it's far easier to just say one guy wanted Detroit to die and one guy wanted Detroit to survive.
Not only wanted, but made it survive.
I get it. It's a hard sell, but I do think the truth is actually way more nuanced.
But that's because Romney he's making the wrong point. What Romney should have been arguing is he wants success for Detroit in the long term. That's the problem with the auto bailout, is you may have saved 1 million jobs in the near term, but what you've done is you've sort of perpetuated a failing model within an industry. So you're going to have some short-term gains for you're sacrificing sort of like this unseen long-term factor. If Romney was able to articulate a message of what the actual point of letting organizations fail, that should fail, that are set up to fail, which is there's this long-term benefit that comes from it. That may be too nuanced of a point to win an election, but that's the only point that's
United Airlines failed. And there are many great companies that have filed bankruptcy and then come back.